Hello everyone. So I just wanted to create a short video to talk a little bit about selective attention and what we mean when we talk about selective attention. So whenever we use the term selective attention, to give a rough definition to it, we're basically referring to any sort of skill in which we're able to focus on one input and ignore other stimuli. So when we're talking selective attention, we're focusing on, we're in a noisy environment, we're trying to listen to our friend talk, and so we're focusing on our friend talking and ignoring all of the information or the sounds around us. And so I apologize, earlier I made an incorrect statement. This is actually where the William James slide is that I was referring to when it comes to attention. But early on, William James wrote the Principles of Psychology, basically the textbook of modern psychology. And in it, he defines selective attention as something that everybody knows what attention is. It's the taking possession of the mind in clear and vivid form of one out of what seems several simultaneously possible objects or trains of thoughts. Focalization, concentration of consciousness or of its essence. It implies a withdrawal from some things in order to deal effectively with others. Now, as I've said before, right, attention is a construct, and so, I provided a rough operational definition for it. Williams James operational definition is pretty similar too, but he does a kind of beautiful way of explaining it, where we're withdrawing from some things in order to deal effectively with others. But this is what we're talking about whenever we're talking about selective attention in this course. Now, traditionally, one of the ways that selective attention has been measured is by something called a dichotic listening task. And if I were teaching this course in a classroom, usually I'll have three students come up to the front of the classroom, and one student will sit in the middle, and their job is just to repeat back whatever somebody's saying to them. And then I'll have two other people on their left and right side, respectively, and those people will be reading from a textbook or whatever book they happen to have. And so both of them will start reading at the exact same time, and then the person sitting in the middle, what they have to do is repeat back everything that's being said to the person on their right. And then eventually what will happen is we'll switch, and now they'll have to ignore the person on their right, and they'll have to repeat back what the person on the left is saying to them. And it creates some fun times in the course. Sometimes people have problems getting started on this task. It's tough to do. But basically what they're doing here is a dichotic listening task. Now, the other way this can be done and the way that you can test this yourself, I provided a YouTube link where you can do it. But as long as you have stereo headphones where you have a right and a left headphone, then basically what will happen is that you'll have two different speakers presented to your right and your left ear respectively. We're going to call the right ear one channel and the left ear another channel. So and what you're supposed to do is you're told what channel to attend to, whether that's the right channel or the left channel, and just echo back or repeat back what it is that was said to you. And that's the dichotic listening task. And if you try this task, yeah, it's a little funny at first, but you pretty quickly get used to doing it, and it's pretty easy after that. And people are able to attend to the attended channel, or the one that they're told to repeat back, and are able to ignore the unattended channel. And so things go relatively smoothly with this task. Now, as far as the main findings of this task, one of the things that we find is that shadowing the attended channel is pretty good. People are able to pretty accurately echo exactly what it is that they're hearing in either the right or the left ear, the right or left channel, or attended channel. Numerous terms for the exact same thing, but people are able to do this task well. And if you try it with friends and family, you'll see that are able to do the task well too. Now, one of the questions that comes up is, well, what happens to the unattended channel? And a lot of times participants can either rarely recall or recognize what was presented in the unattended channel. And so it's almost as if they're blocking it out completely. In fact, there are some examples, and there are some controversial studies where people do or don't find certain things. But and this comes up in the book. They talk about some examples where they find that people don't attend to this, or I'm sorry, that they are able to recall some of the information. But you can have pretty drastic switches in speakers, so you can go from a male to a female speaker, and if it's in the unattended channel, chances are good that the person won't realize it, or you can present them with a different language. And so one of the examples is presenting them with the Czech language. And in the case of the Czech language, they didn't even notice it was a different language. And so what this suggests is that people really can selectively tune out or block the unattended channel. Now, one of the interesting things that comes up though is that if they hear either their name or something that's personally relevant to them, that information from the unattended channel does get into attention and it captures their attention. And so I'm going to take a little sidetrack here and talk about a phenomenon in cognitive psychology called the cocktail party effect. And so cocktail parties were a thing when people could get together, and back in the old days, they would get together in a big party and enjoy cocktails together. And it would typically be a noisy environment where everybody was talking and enjoying cocktails and whatnot. And one of the things that happens if you find yourself in a situation like that or a similar type of party is that you could be talking, it can be a very noisy environment, but if somebody says your name, then it'll automatically capture your attention. And that's the cocktail party effect. It's whenever we're attending to something else, we're not even paying attention to the background, but if we hear our name or something that's personally relevant or of interest to us, it'll capture our attention. Suddenly we'll be attending to this thing that was just in the background. So, like I said, it could be your name. Also, if it's something that you're really, really interested in. So, for example, I love bicycles. So, if I'm going about my day and I hear somebody talking about bicycles in the background, it's suddenly going to capture my attention. Those are all examples of the cocktail party effect. In a previous semester, I had a student that was obsessed with the Batman movies. And so if somebody was talking about Batman in the background, she would always notice and turn her head and start listening to that conversation just because that was a big hobby and a piece of fandom for her. So, cocktail party effect, it's a capturing of our attention, even though it's in our unattended channel. So what this information kind of taken together suggests is that information at some point is lost or filtered out. And so, this happens, we do this filtering out of this background information because, right, we're not able to recall what we've heard in the background or anything like that, which suggests that some sort of a filter has come into place into attention. And so we'll talk about that. But I also want you to hang on to this idea of the cocktail party effect because that raises a problem. It's easy to think of different ways that you can filter information out that you're not paying attention to, but you still need to be able to explain the cocktail party effect, right? And so basically what we're doing is theory development here of how can we, here's the data. Most people, don't get caught up or their attention doesn't get captured by the unattended channel. You can make pretty drastic changes to the unattended channel and they're not even going to notice. And that suggests that we filter this information out. However, the cocktail party effect suggests that at least some information has to get in somewhere in order to explain how this effect can still occur. And so that's what we'll be talking about, is really some of the theories of how we filter out information. Now, very broadly, filtering can either occur in one of two stages. It can either occur early or it can occur late. And so these are ideas that are called early selection filtering and late selection filtering. And in the concept of early selection filtering, basically stimuli receives little consideration, if at all, at the perceptual level. Basically, whatever it is that we're not attending to, once it gets to the perceptual level, it gets filtered out before the before our perceptions even process it, right? So it barely gets it in the front door and it's automatically filtered out. And so that only the things that we're attending to get into our perceptual system, into the brain, so on and so forth. And so those would be early selection filterings, where there's a very early filter that if, at the most extreme case, it doesn't even make it into being processed by the perceptual system. That information just gets dropped. Now, late selection filtering basically suggests that that information does get into the perceptual system, but somewhere between the perceptual system and higher cognitive processing, that information gets filtered out, okay, or gets weeded out. Now, there are some different ideas about when exactly this happens, but the key take-home thing with late selection filtering is that information gets in, and then once that information is in the perceptual system, at some point it's filtered out and it's separated. Now, one of the ways that I like to explain this that seems to work across the board is to think about moving. So if you've ever had your own apartment or if you moved out of your house or anything like that, there are two options for how you can set up your new apartment, especially if it's your first time out and you don't really have any towels or furniture or anything like that. One of the things that you can do is that you can take all of the furniture and towels and everything that everybody gives you, right? And so you just take everything, you put it into your new place, and then what you do are things that you don't like or don't use, you start getting rid of them. But at least you have all the things that make up a home available to you. And then that's when you start filtering out. And that would be a great example of a late selection filtering. You move everything into the new place, the new apartment. You take everything that everybody gives you, and then once it's all in the new place and apartment, that's when you start getting rid of things and saying, I don't really like these towels, or these towels don't work for me, or this piece of furniture really doesn't work. That would be an example of a late selection filtering. Now, an alternative thing that people do is, when people find out that you're moving, they always want to kind of give you their stuff so that they don't have to worry about it anymore. And if you were to take an early selection viewpoint on that, basically what you would do is be very selective before you even took things from people. And so you might look at the couch that they're offering to give you and say, I don't like this couch. I know it's not going to work for the space, so I'm not even going to take it. Thank you for your offer. I appreciate the offer, but it's just not going to work for me. And so in that case, they're basically not letting anything into the apartment unless it's something that they appreciate and enjoy and like. And so that would be early selection, where it doesn't even make it into the apartment. They already filter out that furniture so they don't have to deal with it whatsoever. Now, usually whenever I give this example in classrooms, there's a fair amount of argument of which is the best way to do these. I'm not going to delve into this, but I hope that it at least provides a real world example of how we can think and wrap our heads around this idea of filtering of information of, does it happen really, really early before it makes it into the apartment, or does it happen really, really late? Now, when we talk about early selection, we're really going to be talking about the bottleneck theory of filtering. So bottleneck theory of filtering is an example of an early selection filtering mechanism. When we talk about filter theory and booster theories, these are really going to be late selection filterings. Okay, so all the filtering is going to happen after everything's gotten into the perceptual system. So hopefully that'll help as we now talk a little bit more about the different theories of how we might filter out this information. So the first theory that I want to talk about is something called bottleneck theory. And in bottleneck theory, basically, this theory looks at attention as attentional resources are very limited. And so what we need to do is get rid of unimportant information as early as possible. So in filter theories, or yes, and in the bottleneck theory, sorry, let me step back. In the bottleneck theory, basically what we do is we create a bottleneck. So if you think of a bottleneck as like on a freeway where you might have three lanes of traffic, and then because of construction it suddenly goes to one, that basically you have to be very careful to let those three lanes of traffic merge down into one lane and not interfere with each other. Similar idea with the bottleneck theory, where we have very limited amount of information even coming into the system, and that's how it filters out information. Here I have a small picture that demonstrates this, if I can find my mouse here, and for some reason it's hiding on me. Okay. In this particular picture, one of the things that we notice is things get into that sensory buffer, but as soon as they get into that sensory buffer, they're basically blocked out of the system. They don't make it into short-term memory. And so they're filtered out very, very early on. Now, bottleneck theory makes sense and it's really efficient, right? We don't have to deal with unimportant information. The perceptual system doesn't have to deal with it. But one of the things to remember that we need to explain is, well, how can we still have the cocktail party effect? How does our name or relevant information still make it in? According to bottleneck theory, that's really hard to explain. People have tried to do it, but they haven't been the most appealing explanations for how this happens, right? Because technically, according to bottleneck theory, that background information shouldn't even make it into the perceptual system so that, we hear if somebody says their name or some sort of relevant information. So the bottleneck theory has a very, very hard time explaining that. Now, as I've already suggested, both filter and booster theories are both late-stage filtering ideas. And so unlike bottleneck theory, where everything's dropped before the perceptual system, in both of these theories, information makes it into the perceptual system, and then at some point in between the perceptual system and higher cognitive abilities, such as short-term memory, that unimportant information gets processed and filtered out. Now, in the case of filter theory, basically, it's a late stage theory, and it doesn't make any claims as to where exactly this filtering happens, but again, it happens somewhere between perceptual system and, higher cognitive processes such as short-term memory, and it filters out any information that's unrelevant. Same as if you were to put it through a coffee filter, so that you don't get the grounds of the coffee in, but you get the coffee with the, or I'm sorry, the water with the oil of the beans in it, which is what makes coffee. Now, one of the nice things about filter theory is that it does still explain why we hear our name, right? Because it suggests, okay, the perceptual system's already processing. The perceptual system is going to do a quick check in the unimportant information and see if we hear our name or anything that's relevant to us. And then if we don't, it's just going to get dropped out. And, at some point, it's just going to get filtered out, just like coffee grounds to make coffee. So filter theory does a good job of at least explaining why we hear a name. But this is also a lot of resources. Basically, if you think about this as some sort of a computer program or something like this, or if you've been saving multiple drafts of a paper that you're working on for a class, to submit all of those drafts of the paper is going to require a lot of memory from your computer, right? And it's not going to be all that useful. And so filter theory at least explains kind of all the phenomena that we know about attention. But at the same time, it's a problem because it would require a lot of resources, right? This holding on to this information, checking it really quick to see what's going on, and dealing with all of that information. So in order to kind of help to reduce the costs that are associated with filter theory, people have proposed what are called booster theories. And basically, and the idea with a booster theory is that all the unimportant information that's coming in is still coming in, just like it is in filter theory. However, it gets attenuated. And so if you were to think of this as like two radios playing, one that you're trying to attend to and another that was playing in the background, basically in booster theory, what happens is you turn down the volume on the radio that you're trying to pay attention to. In this particular case, that information still gets in, right? You can do late stage filtering with it, but it doesn't require as many resources because you just have to do a quick scan to see if anything captures your attention at all. And since it's a smaller or weakened, attenuated signal, it's not going to require as many resources. And so basically what you're doing is you're boosting the information that you think is important and then doing a quick scan in the background at a very low volume level or low resource level in order to be able to see if there's anything that captures your attention. Now, the nice thing about this attenuated channel is that if you do hear, or if you think that you hear your name or something like that, is that you can basically go into the equivalent and then turn the radio up, or the radio volume up in order to be able to scan it and see if it has the relevant information that you're trying to get, such as your name. When it comes to booster theories, think about this analogy of having the two radios and how basically we can have two radios playing. There's one that we're really attending to and another one that we have the volume turned down. However, if we think that there might be something that's relevant to us for our safety or to recognize a friend or something like that, then what we can do is we still have this information. So basically, we can quickly turn the volume up on that unattended radio in order to be able to do a quick check to see if it was something that should be capturing our attention. Now, because of this attenuation and this low volume, one of the things that helps booster theory over filter theory is the fact that it doesn't require as many resources, right? And so having this attenuated signal helps to reduce, or at least, yeah, reduce the amount of resources that it takes to do this process. So those are the three major types of filtering theories that people have. If you have any questions or anything about them, definitely feel free to reach out. This is something that is a tough thing for students to wrap their head around the first time that they perceive it. So if you do have or receive it, so if you do have any questions or anything, definitely feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to help. The other thing to keep in mind is also how well each of these different theories explains the data. And so going back to hypothesis testing and generating hypotheses, if you think about those issues from your research methods course, how they both or how all three of them, have different effects and different outcomes as far as being able to explain all the phenomena that we know about selective attention. So again, if you have any questions, definitely reach out. Always happy to help.